Let's take a closer look at this Asia century at the APEC meeting and Australia's role in the region. Michael Wesley is a Professor of International Affairs and the Dean of the College of Asia and the Pacific at the Australian National University. Merriden Varrall is the Director of Geopolitics and Tax at KPMG and a non-resident Fellow at the Lowy Institute. And Pawan Luthra is CEO of the Indian Link Media Group in Australia. Welcome to the program, all of you. Of course, as something that we often overlook also continues, and that is that rivalry between China and India, countries that have been to war. There's a skirmish last year that could very easily have escalated over a border conflict. When India looks at China and its expansion and its influence in something like the Pacific, not necessarily in India's sphere of influence, what is the perspective there? How does India view that?
Oh, India looks at it from a very suspicious point of view because it to them is quite clear that China is strategically placing itself in a number of countries around India. If India looks at it, Pakistan is almost gone. There's a big influence of China in Nepal. And recently the activities, as Michael had just said about the maritime ways around India, China's strategic positioning in Sri Lanka has been noted by the Indian government, and that's put them a lot on the back foot.
Now, Pawan, Australia, you know, we are so used to talking about Australia as a Pacific nation. We are also a nation of the Indian Ocean. Is that often, from your perspective, something that gets lost or overlooked?
Well, according to my information, there is always a view that Australia is more looking towards the Pacific rather than towards the Indian Ocean. And India and the strategies or strategic position which India has at that part of the world often gets overlooked.
It's interesting, Pawan, when you look at India and China and where they started out in the 90s, almost at the same position economically. And if you look at where China is now, albeit India's growth is probably greater than China's right now and rapidly increasing. But China, with the certainty of its government, with the control of the Communist Party, has been able to rapidly modernise, develop infrastructure, build its economy, hit those targets. India, with its democracy and much more volatility, has not been the same. Is there a sense that India has been in the shadow of China and feels as if China has got a leap on it?
I think there is a view that China finds itself a little bit in the back corner as to being compared to India when it knows that India is about a third of its economy. So in terms of India taking time to get moving, yes, that's true. But if you look at the last 5 to 7 years, the Indian economic growth has been well above 7.5%, 8%. And now with some firm leadership in New Delhi, chances are that it's going to continue on in the near future. What we have to keep in mind is that India has an extremely young population. The average age is about 29 years, whereas in China, the average age is about 37 years. And this is the young population in India, which has grown up with liberal ideas, with democratic foundations. They are wanting more, and their hunger is something which will make sure the Indian economy and India gets going at a faster pace.
Pawan, when we look at India, one figure that jumps out at me is that it has more billionaires than the United States or China combined. Is there a lost business opportunity potentially for Australia with the focus so much on China?
Well, there are about 273,000 millionaires in India at the moment. And if I look at it, it's a fertile ground for Australia to do business with India. If you look at the similarities, they speak the same language, they follow the same legal system. And we have cricket, which keeps everything in common. There's a shared ground. It's a low-hanging fruit, which for some reason the Australian businesses, the Australian government has not been able to pick.
Pawan, to what extent are we seeing also the fraying of democracy within India, the Hindu nationalism that we've seen, that Modi has been accused of pursuing, that may be damaging the soft guardrails, if you like, of democracy in that country?
Well, I'm saying India has been a democracy now for about 71 odd years. There have been some issues in the past few years, but Modi came into power in 2014 with an overwhelming majority. Chances are that when he goes to the elections, there'll be some punishment which the population of India will give out to him, and that might bring the actions of some of the ultra-right Hindu parties back into line.
Look, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it, Merriden. It's always good to have you on the program.
Thanks.
Pawan, my friend, nice to see you. And Michael, a pleasure to talk to you as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Stan.
Stan.
Thanks, Stan.